Hey, flower friends. It is your friend in flowers, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and welcome to today's garden live show. And today, friends, I am going to be sharing my methodology on how I win the war on weeds by choosing the battles. What you pass over and what you look the other way on and what you tackle full force on. Um, so I'm going to talk about a couple of things. The very best way to really crush weeds is to keep them from being born out of the gate. That means you don't have to take care of them later, right? And I have a couple of ways that I'm going to offer for that. And then we're going to just take a little look at when you have weeds, how can you extinguish those? We are always looking for the quick and fast and easy. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. So if you're new here and we've never met, my name is Lisa, and I am the owner, founder, and head bottle washer here at the Gardener's Workshop, which is started out 30 years ago as a small cut flower farm, literally in the middle of the city. I am completely surrounded by houses at this point. I have a small flower farm, which has gone on to become an education platform. We have a big online garden shop, lots of free resources, and you'll find all of that over at thegardenersworkshop.com. And we just teaching is at the root of everything that we do in empowering people. Everything we do we do for you guys. And so as we are slaying weeds right now, I thought that might be a really great time to actually talk about that. So let's talk about what are those battles that I pick when I'm looking at weed control. First off, I remember the days back in the beginning, I thought I almost quit because of weeds. And I've talked to so many people, they're like, what do you do about the weeds? The weed management thing can really liberate your life, whether you're a gardener or somebody trying to build a commercial farm. You really have to master your whole weed thing. So for us, first up is preventing the weeds from ever being born. That is the lion's share of my success. Is I got to be a little crazy over being sure that weed seeds didn't have the opportunity to get what they needed to sprout. Remember back when I was, before I had a tractor, before I had all this help, and it was just me and 2 little 1/4-acre gardens. And back then, my method of madness was I used a ton of straw as mulch. I used lots of bark, shredded bark as mulch. I would use any free product I could get my hands on. And what I quickly learned is that if I tilled a bed, I used a walk-behind 8-horse Troy belt. If I tilled a bed after I put fertilizer down, I had to immediately mulch it, because even if it sat for 2 days after I tilled and put in fertilizer doesn't really affect it, but prepared the bed. If I waited 2 days before I planted it or mulched it, those 2 days were just enough for weed seeds, who are native plants, y'all. They grow a little quicker and a little faster with the fewest resources. They had just enough head start that even if I then did use some type of straw or pine straw or anything, they got enough head start that they could pop through. So I was indoctrinated and there wasn't enough of me to go around. When I started my flower farm, I was back before we had, nobody even knew that it was a thing back then. I had more customers than I had flowers out of the gate. So I was really challenged by this. So I was busy trying to grow more flowers and not spending a lot of time weeding. And that's what really led me to this. So what that means is the first step to preventing weeds is that when you work the soil, however you do that, whether you till, shovel, broad fork, or you don't do anything, leaving soil uncovered for any amount of time is going to grow weeds. I mean, there are billions of weed seeds in every handful of soil that you pick up, and those seeds have just been waiting for what you perhaps just gave it: light, which is the biggie, and water, and then oxygen, and they start sprouting. I don't know if you've ever prepared a bed or pulled out a crop and tilled, and you think, okay, we'll plant that tomorrow, and then you don't, and then you come back 10 days later and the bed is totally overgrown. I mean, that is totally self-induced, right? So for us, the rule is when we don't prepare a bed until we can actually cover it. And that's why the biodegradable film became such a huge piece for us. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but below your video, there's actually a ribbon of products. And the product, like what I'm getting ready to talk about, the biodegradable film, is down there if you want to check that out more. And if you're actually on a phone and you can't see that ribbon, if you close the comment box, you can usually see that. So the biodegradable film was a real changer for me because, and I laid it by hand, gosh, for several years. I can't remember exactly. Was a real game changer. So instead of tilling a bed and then hauling in all this different types of organic mulch that I was going to use, we could make a bed, immediately put the biodegradable film on it, tuck it in, and just leave that bed. All light is blocked. And that was a huge step in preventing weeds on my farm, right? And so those beds sometimes would sit there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks even. And then we would go to plant them. And one of the really eye-opening experiences for me in using the biodegradable film. So we then poke holes. I mean, the film is super easy to plant through. So this is a byproduct of a corn byproduct. Actually, it's a plant-based, totally biodegradable. It is so easy to poke a hole in. So we make our beds with the light side up when it's hot outside, like it is now. But in the winter months and in cool springs, we make it with the black side up. So we've made our beds and they're sitting out there, and we go and make our holes and plant, right? Well, about 10 to 14 days after we plant our transplants, and we'll talk about direct seeding in a moment. I do not direct seed into any kind of mulch. And so you plant your plants and you come back in 10 or 14 days. And if you make your holes too big, this really is obvious to you. We make pretty small holes because we've learned. But when you see the number of little weed seeds that germinate right there in that hole, and if you just stop to imagine if your entire bed top was not covered, that's what it would look like. It is just a big turning point. So preventing weed seeds from getting that light, which for us, the biodegradable film just allowed us to do it on a larger scale, quicker, less labor, and did a great job of it and helped our overall just weed prevention, because the less weeds you actually have being born is the less weed seed populations, right, that actually turn up. So that's how we prevent weeds in a bed that we're getting ready to plant in. Now, let's just say that you have pulled out a crop and you prepared a bed, but you aren't really ready to plant in it yet. This happens to us with our sunflower successions. If you leave that bed, as I aforementioned, even for one day, uncovered, the weed seeds are already, you're not going to see them, but they're already doing their job. They're starting. So we have a practice now that if a bed is not covered in film immediately, and it's prepared, we then use silage tarps. Silage tarps can be used in a couple of different ways. And when I talk to you about how we use it for extinguishing, I've got a little video to show you. But I want to tell you how I use it. And this really changed the way we use them. There's so many uses, y'all, when you think outside of the box. So we have beds, in about 24-inch pathways, 30-inch beds. We actually took one of the silage tarps, which is in the ribbon down below, if you need it. They're 20 foot wide and 50 feet long. We actually would cut that into 4 5-foot strips, 50 feet long. And you know what that allowed us to do? That we could till, prepare, or pull a crop out of one bed that still has flowers or stuff growing on either side and actually just tarp that bed. That has really revolutionized our life. I mean, we use tarps like a tool around here now. It's not just the big pieces that you're doing whole gardens with. So sunflowers, we prepare a 100-foot bed. Well, we only plant about 10 feet a week. So we prepare the bed, do our fertilizer, till it in, the bed's beautiful. We plant the first week and then cover the rest of the bed with silage tarp immediately. And each week we fold it back. Silage tarps really can have a lot of different uses on your farm, but prevention of weed seed sprouting. And I've often asked, what about using landscape fabric for that same point? That doesn't work because landscape fabric, if it's new, allows water to come through it. That's the whole point of it being plastic, is it's blocking the light and the water. And that's what really prevents that whole process from even getting started. So the prevention is a big part of it. And then, of course, I'll just mention that another prevention, if you're holding it for at least 30 days or so, is to plant a cover crop. You know, we love using buckwheat, which is a quick turn, 30 days from seed to bloom, and then you turn it under. So that's another option. And we do also incorporate that. But that's more for longer term holding. For us, using those strips of tarp, really buy us time for a couple weeks. You'd be amazed how many weeds grow in a couple weeks, y'all. I mean, it is just so disheartening. Now you have more work to do, right? So that's how we prevent weeds. Biodegradable film, using tarp to hold beds, and then for the long term, doing cover crops. Now, let's say you've got weeds. And this is where you really have to pick your battles, friends. So, and I counsel, we were just in my private student group for my flower farming school. Somebody chimed in and was talking about their weed pressure and what they were going to do about the weeds. And, you know, we all jumped in and said, don't even bother doing that. That's just a waste of time. When you start growing commercially like we do, it is no longer pristine, even though people tend to think that my farm seems to be pristine. But you know why that is, y'all? We keep the edges neat. That's what it's all about, mowing and weed eating. I mean, I have somebody does that. He's out there doing it right now as I speak, right? So you really have to pick your battles. And here's another thing I want to say about the biodegradable film. The biodegradable film, we plant our transplants, and for warm season stuff, typically within, let's see, this is June. They were planted mid-April. By mid-May, those transplants that were planted already are totally covering the tops of the beds. You know, they've grown and filled out, right? At that point, the film has done its job. Now nature takes over. You know, it's shading out. The ground is not getting sun exposure. And we don't worry about weeds. If we have a flower, a weed here and a weed there and a weed here, and that's fine. Ignore them, y'all, because the plants have outgrown the weed pressure. And that's probably, for me, I would say that's right up there in the top 2 or 3 best uses of the biodegradable film. It's like it does the heavy lifting for those first few weeks when you first plant, because it holds the weed pressure from developing until the canopy grows up. And then I don't care about it. Like right now, Andrew's weed eating and mowing, and he knows now that those plants are full grown. Like, let me show y'all this. I just harvested this for something I just did. Look at this. Is our Planet Pink seed collection. Are they beautiful? This is a breast cancer honoring seed collection because I'm a survivor. And anyway, so they're blooming out there. They're tall. And Andrew's out there mowing and weed eating, and he knows that he does not have to be as careful to not hit the film with the weed eater or the mower, because at this point it doesn't really matter. And so you pick your battles. So now that the plants are grown up, we can be a little bit quicker and more aggressive in our mowing of the pathways and keeping the edge where the weeds tend to grow because they're getting light with our actual, maintaining the garden, right? And so let's just say you have a bed that's weedy and you don't need it immediately, because I want to talk about how you can use tarps. And actually, I want to show you, I'm going to show you a little video here of me extinguishing. This was actually crimson clover. I think that it actually already been mowed. So let me see if I can bring this up and not cut us off, right? All right, so here it goes. So what this is really, it's in fast forward, right? This is really showing how a one person can actually put a big tarp down by themselves. Those are weight bags, which this is what those guys are. I'll show you those as soon as we're done. But I'm unfolding a new silage tarp, and that's 20 by 50. And this is early in spring. So instead of tilling, I'm going to completely cover that crop right there. And I actually, in fact, put another one on behind that. And the thing to know when you're managing large silage tarps or large row covers or large anything that can become a sail is to keep it low to the ground. You know what I mean? You aren't lifting it up real high as you're trying to adjust it. And you have to have enough of those weight bags. Those weight bags are what we use to hold down insect netting, row cover, tarps. We use them all the time. And this is what they look like. And I'm just holding it up here and you can see those. We filled the bags with either sand, soil, or gravel. Gravel is what we typically use in the bags. These bags, just like every other plastic product in the world, break down over time. And so when we're not using them, we keep them in a pile with a silage tarp or something over it to block the UV rays just so they last longer. 15 pounds is the magical weight for weight bags to really work the best. So that's a use for silage tarp. So let's just say you have a new patch of area where you want to start a garden and you don't want to till or you don't have a tiller or what have you. In going into the heat of summer, we're heading into the season like right now, that you can actually do this the quickest and the most effective. And that is to cook the weeds below the silage tarp, right? This does not work in the winter, y'all. If you cover weeds in the winter with the silage tarp, they're going to be right there when you get back in the spring, and they may have even thrived, right? So, you can do this in the wintertime, and you can actually do that again with the strips, as we talked about cutting those 5-foot wide strips on individual beds. But for us, because the problem or the drawback to doing this method is it takes time. If you have time to give up space in your garden, literally for a couple of months, this method really works. And it doesn't till the soil. You can start off with a pretty clean slate, but it's time that actually is required. So 6 to 10 weeks is what you hear and read about, but I will tell you that in our experience, the best time to do it is to mow it, to let it get a little wet from some rain, and then cover it for some really high heat. And that really accelerates the cooking process. But these big silage tarps are predisposed to wind. You have to really pull them flat, have enough weights around the edge so you aren't chasing them. You're not getting them out of the power lines in front of your house. Just saying. And so you can use silage tarps in this way also. Now, let's where am I? Here we are. So let's talk about if you are a person that is direct sowing. We don't really do much direct sowing this time of the year. We typically only direct sow in the fall. And we implement weed prevention from the get-go. Actually, the beds are planted with our weed prevention plan in mind. And I've got a video to show you this too. And so let me bring that video up, and y'all might as well be watching me hoe while we are talking here. Let's just move it a little bit. So first off, what I want you to notice about these hoes is notice the position that I'm walking in, and you'll see it closer here in just a minute. I am standing upright. I'm not hunched over, chopping the ground. I am literally pulling the hoe through the top few inches. Let's get me down and get me to come back around. Here we go. So this is first off a direct sown bed of cool flowers. There's 3 rows. That's my first plan of action. Instead of putting my normal 4 rows of plantings in a 30-inch wide bed, which is what this is, I only do 3 rows when I'm going to have to cultivate in between them. It just allows you to be a little quicker and more efficient. And this is the first hoeing of this bed. That's why I'm being very deliberate about what I'm doing, because they aren't really big plants yet. It'd be easy to overcome them, but I am literally pulling the hoe through the soil and extinguishing all of those developing weed seedlings that you probably can't even see yet, right? And what are the weeds of the winter and fall? That's chickweed. And see, I go down one side and let's see if I turn. I didn't watch it this far. Yep. I turn around and then I'll go back between those first two rows. I'm not standing in one place and chopping here and chopping there. I'm just being very deliberate about what I'm doing. And by doing this 10 to 14 days after you've direct sown, maybe a few days earlier in warm season if you're doing that, that is extinguishing any of those seeds that are on the surface that are already starting to develop. But guess what it's not doing, y'all? It is not bringing up fresh weed seeds because I'm just skimming, right? I'm just skimming through there. Now, we have two different stand-up hoes to choose from. There's the trapezoid garden hoe, which I absolutely love. That one's got the bigger blade. And then the razor hoe, which is the colonial, which is a longer slimming. I use them both just about equally. But if you were only going to get one hoe, I would definitely go for the garden hoe. The razor hoe is really great to use at this stage of what we're looking at right here, because after you've cleared or cleaned the top of the beds, it's really easy to use the razor hoe because it is thinner. I actually have one right here. See how thin that blade is? You can actually slide that blade into the row of seedlings and thin very efficiently. I look to do everything standing as upright as possible, and paying attention to the way that you actually plant your seeds makes or breaks this deal. Notice how almost perfectly straight these rows are. The person that plants the seeds should be the hoer, because you realize just how significant and fast and easy you can actually hoe when the rows are pretty straight. And so what you just saw me do, I have one more. No, that's the last row. What you just saw me do, that's like 100-foot bed. I mean, probably took me 5 minutes at the most. And that means that all the weed seeds on the surface have been extinguished. Now, both of the hoes are in our store, the colonial razor hoe as well as the trapezoid garden hoe. And I will tell you that they are lifetime tools. I actually have mine here. This literally is the hoe that I use, and it's dirty. And the hoe heads are made in Switzerland. The handles come from New England, and they're made out of spring steel, which not only means that they stay incredibly sharp, but you can sharpen them. But let me tell you what the significance, why I was standing upright going down the row? It's the angle of the blade to the actual handle. It's this whole piece right here that really changes everything. And when you're standing upright, pulling this through the soil, it's thumbs up. If you think about what most people do, is they are holding it to chop and their thumbs are down. If you have to kind of retrain yourself, you get no knot in your back, and that is the best way to extinguish developing weed seeds in direct sown beds. And doing that in a timely manner will change your life, because you'll never have that. I mean, I don't know if any of y'all have experienced this. Have you come out, let's just say you fall or very early spring, kind of planted some cool season stuff, and then you come out in April, you haven't been to your garden in a couple of weeks for whatever reason, and the chickweed has just exploded. Chickweed trembles in the presence of those hoes because chickweed spreads out, right? Those hoe blades just slice those roots and you can get rid of them. But you don't want to let it get that way. Y'all, weed prevention is really a lot about timing, and picking your battles and not wasting your time. And I'm going to tell you, I already mentioned with the biodegradable film that we do not direct sow in there. And the reason we don't direct sow in there is I've done it, many experiments. So what happens, especially this time of the year, you make a bed, you put the biodegradable film, you punch the holes, and you put a couple seeds in each hole. Well, while you're waiting for those seeds to germinate and grow, guess what else is germinating and typically outgrowing your flower seeds or your vegetable seeds? It's the weed seeds. Far more labor intensive than any other method I have ever done in my life is direct sowing into film. If you're going to direct sow, I recommend doing like we just saw in that video, where you direct sow deliberately so you can cultivate quickly and efficiently with a hoe that's easy to use and that you can stand up. But another big part of our battle is actually growing those transplants, right? And so these are, we have a little competition going on the farm right now. We sell seed collections, right, for people that want to plant little 3x10 cutting gardens. And one of them is that Planet Pink, which you just saw. So last Tuesday, the 3rd, whatever day that was, last Tuesday, I started these. These are 60 zinnias in the small blocks that are now 7 days old. And at the same time, I planted that whole garden by direct seeding it out in the garden. We're having a little contest to see who blooms first. And I can already tell you the bed that I planted it in is high quality. I mean, it's a super raised bed. It's got commercial soil in it. It's not out in the garden where there's 5 million weed seeds, but it still is taking me more labor to keep that little bed watered because they're outside in the heat and weed free than it is to take care of these seedlings indoors. These guys will be planted probably in about a week or so. So planting transplants, that's one of the reasons that commercial growers choose to transplant over direct sowing, is because you beat the weed pressure. Because think about this while I get my tray. Think about, instead of walking out there and planting a bunch of seeds, you walk out to a garden that you've already prepared the bed and it's mulched, whether that's biodegradable film or straw or shredded leaves or shredded bark or whatever your pleasure is. And you plant those transplants into that mulch. They're already like 3 to 5 weeks old. And within a week, their canopy is already going to be covering that bed versus going out and direct sowing into a bed that can't have mulch and film on it. Sowing your seeds, having to water them every day, which I'm watering every day too indoors, but it's like a 3-minute job. And it's doing it upright and it's just easier, right? It's just far less labor intensive. And then you have to also, again, keep those seeds free of weed seeds developing. So I just wanted to show you how, if we've never met before, how I make soil blocks. And the soil block maker kit is in that ribbon of products down below. If you are interested in this, this is the blocking mix. And this is the tool that I use almost exclusively. It's the small 3/4 inch blocker. This blocking mix is pretty moist. We give you all of those directions. And I push it down twice to be sure that my blocks or the chambers are really well filled. And here's the part that makes this a great tabletop in-home method. We use trays with no drainage holes. So that means, first let's do this. So I placing it on this little tray, and y'all, that dadgum fast, we just made 20, I can't reach the camera, y'all. Let me get rid of this. We just made 20 of those little 3/4 inch containers. That quick, right? So it's a super environmentally friendly method. These trays, yes, they're foam, but friends, we use these for years. These are reusable trays. Because there's no drainage holes, that means you can do it anywhere in your home. Now, I have no hoop or greenhouses. I never have. All these years of being a flower farmer, we start everything indoors and basically like a spare bedroom. It's just a grow room over there. It's 10x10 with grow lights and seedling heat mats. And this is 7 days out with zinnias. And so we typically plant zinnias when they're about 3 weeks old, 2 to 3 weeks old. It just really depends. And that soil block maker kit is down below in your ribbon. It has everything you need to get started soil blocking. It has the ready-made mix. It has the trays, has your choice of 3 warm or cool season seeds, has the small blocker. Plus, it has my, oh, y'all, my eye. It has the Seed Starting Made Easy, which is my online course. that takes you from very beginning all the way through the process to the end of seed starting with soil blocking, as well as direct sowing, and even starting seeds in plug trays, using it with sunflowers, because we do that because we grow so many of them. So friends, I hope that you got some ideas about the number one thing to do is to stop growing weeds, right? So don't be messing in the soil unless you're going to instantly cover it. You know, I mentioned earlier, back before I had tractors and didn't use film, and I was still just had 2 little quarter-acre gardens, I would literally create and make a bed and complete it. That's a lot of work for one person by herself. They were 75 to 100-foot beds, I guess, maybe 90-foot back then. And I would till it, put all the mess on it, till it again. Then I would mulch it, and then I would go to the next one. And it was very labor intensive. But guess what I learned? I virtually had no weeds, hardly at all. And you know, when you direct sow and hoe like we saw in that video, what you soon figure out is when you do go out to your garden during that time that those plants are coming on that you've been hoeing, you know. So I would say we probably hoe our beds probably 2 to 3 times, and then we're done. Once the canopy grows up and covers the bed, the pressure's done. You don't care if 1 or 2 weeds sprout at that point. But when there's only 1 or 2 weeds or 10 weeds instead of 10,000, you don't mind stopping and pulling them. That's the good part of minimizing the number of weeds. You're inclined to actually weed more because of that. But we've learned, it's like what Andrew's doing right now. I could probably spend 2 days going through our beds, pulling out random pieces of grass that have grown up through the zinnias or the coxcomb or whatever's out there. But it's just, they're not causing any problem. I'll probably pluck the seed head off of it before it does that. But pick your battles. And the number one battle you need to pick is to not turn soil and disturb it until you can cover it with something, whether that's biodegradable film, a silage tarp, or some kind of mulch, or be ready to cultivate it or plant a cover crop. And that, my friends, is how you can just really make a big difference, because we're heading straight into high weed time. And I will say also that if you have an out of control weedy area that's making you crazy, get somebody to mow it. Get your husband to mow it. Get your kid to mow it down, because when the minute you mow it, you feel so much better because it's not a weedy mess anymore with a bunch of seed heads, right? So that's our method around here, is to keep the edges tidy, which means cut weeds down, and just don't let those little boogers be born. And that's what really, really helps. And I just want to let everybody know that we have a once a year free open farm and warehouse here on our farm. It happens June 28th. I'm in southeastern Virginia. People literally come from all over the country, and you're invited. And you can go to our website, thegardenersworkshop.com, and at the top of every page, there's a link that says, you know, more details. We live in a vacation mecca, y'all. We have Colonial Williamsburg, Busch Gardens, Water Country, Yorktown, Virginia Beach. I mean, there's just so many great attractions here that people often come and bring their family, and then they just drop them off for the day at the farm and the warehouse. The warehouse is 4 miles away, and it's just a really fun day. It's from 10 to 2. You do not have to register unless you're one of our students that got the special invite for the coffee with your instructors. We'd love to have you come, and we can't wait to see you there. But you'll find all of that over at thegardenersworkshop.com. And so till we meet again, friends, thanks for showing up. And remember to give me a follow and a like if you don't want to miss any of the future episodes. And we appreciate your support. That's the thing you can do to help us the very most, is to subscribe, like, and share on any of our platforms. That just helps us to reach more people. And we appreciate it so very, very much. Until we meet again, friends. Ciao.